All right, you guys good? Mining in the West. So, keep in mind that the gold rush of 1848-49 is not the first, or is not the only, and not the last gold rush. There are going to be a number of gold and silver rushes from the pre-Civil War era into the post-Civil War Gilded Age. Pikes Peak, Denver, Carson City, Virginia City, Park City, Utah. These major gold and silver booms create silver town, gold and silver boom towns that were known as Heldorados. A lot of lawlessness. Example of that would be Park City, Utah. Beautiful place to go visit. If you're a skier or a snowboarder, I highly recommend it. The origin of that town being developed was for mining. The folks down in Salt Lake City, very pious Mormons, were not very happy about all of these miners and undesirable characters moving into the area. A lot of hard living, hard drinking, outlaws. Okay? Keep in mind, a lot of folks get really wealthy making a living off the miners. Small business owners, guys like Levi Strauss, jean maker, the riveted jeans, people that sold shovels, pickaxes, created general stores, saloon owners, casino owners, brothels were big business out in the West. Do keep in mind that this is an opportunity for a lot of Civil War veterans, single women, free African Americans, immigrants coming over and trying to make it out west as well. A lot of people try to get wealthy off the mining, but the people that make the most money are the entrepreneurs that head out there. A lot of early voting rights for women in the West. Wyoming, Utah, Colorado, Idaho, Montana. Those are your earliest voting rights. In fact, the first woman elected to federal office was Jeannette Rankin in 1916, elected from the 1st District in the House of Representatives from Montana. She was also a suffragette fighting for women's rights to vote. The folklore and the story of the West and the satire of the West are captured by authors like Bret Harte, who wrote the Tales of the Argonauts, and Samuel Clemens, Mark Twain, who wrote this collection of short stories, Roughing It. If you haven't had an opportunity to read any of Mark Twain's work or Bret Harte's work, I highly recommend it. They're the fathers of American satire and the American humorist movement. Both of these guys went out there to try to make it as prospectors. It didn't work out. They pursued literary careers instead. This is an example of a Helldorado that by the turn of the century becomes a fairly upstanding town in the Dakotas. This is Deadwood, South Dakota. A lot of lawlessness. Most of the money was being made in a couple of different ventures. Cattle drives, mining, timber. So this is what Deadwood looks like in 1876 at the end of Reconstruction. Beef bonanza. Beef was big business. Moving cattle to market. What allows cattle to be moved to market quickly are two groups during this era of the post-Civil War period. Cowboys and the railroad. Railheads, places like Abilene, Dodge City, Denver, Cheyenne, are going to be able to connect to larger cities like St. Louis, Chicago, and that's where the meat packing industry takes off. The era of the cowboy is only 20 years. We're going to talk about why that era is so short. But why do we keep this in the American psyche? Why do we romanticize the cowboy era? Yeah. Yeah. It's in our history. It represents freedom.
Like how England, like kind of like spice. It's their history.
Yeah.
Well, it's pretty fun to think about, cowboys and, shootouts.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah. It's like this feeling of the Wild West sort of mentality. So, cattle towns, a lot like those mining towns, pop up. Some of them make it. Some of them don't. Anybody ever visit a ghost town out west? No? Yeah, cool. If you ever go out west, you should try to take an opportunity to visit a ghost town. It's pretty cool. So you have a couple of factors that could make or break your city or your town. You're probably going to make it if what comes through your town? Train. You're probably not going to make it if the train doesn't make it to you. You're probably not going to make it if you run out of the supply. If the gold vein or the silver vein runs dry, or the cattle trail runs dry, or you don't have enough water to grow the agriculture that you're trying to produce as a cash crop. So there are a lot of obstacles. Another interesting thing is this is the era of outlaws. Guys like Frank and Jesse James, Kyle Younger. We heard of the James brothers and Younger brothers. Have I heard of them? Nobody? Really? Okay. These guys were outlaws. They got started as outlaws fighting in the American Civil War under a guy named William Quantrill and Bloody Bill Anderson. These guys were what we would call bushwhackers, right? They were like partisans on the border of Kansas and Missouri that did fighting, but they also did a lot of robbery and raiding. So these guys would raid and rob trains, stagecoaches. How many of you guys out there get in the car with your friends and you're like, shotgun? Just a couple of you call shotgun? I still call shotgun all the time. You know why we say that? Yeah. If you're driving a stagecoach and you're moving money, think about the Wells Fargo stagecoach, the guy or possibly the gal on the right, they're going to be holding a shotgun to protect you from potentially getting robbed by the James Younger gangs or gangs like that. This is the beginning of local law enforcement working with federal marshals. But there's a group that's actually more feared than local law enforcement and even federal marshals, and those are called Pinkerton agents. Okay? Does anybody remember us talking about the Pinkertons? Yeah. So what's the premise there? Who was Alan Pinkerton? Yeah, it's a private eye, he's a spy. He has a network of spies. They got a level of federal immunity through the Civil War and the post-Civil War era to the point where they become more than just a detective agency. Their slogan was, "We never sleep." And their symbol's just a single eye, never sleep. The Pinkertons are hired mercenaries. If you're wanted by a Pinkerton, they are going to find you and they're going to bring you back dead or alive. And they are going to make money off of your capture. But the Pinkertons can also be hired to put down a labor uprising. They could be hired to capture an outlaw. The Pinkertons could be hired for a number of different ventures. So, as I mentioned before, the meatpacking business is big business. Armour and Swift. That's Bladder and Holiday and those guys that battle outside of Deadwood with it's actually not Wyatt. It's like on the border of Wyoming and South Dakota. I'm trying to think of the name of that gang. It'll come to me. You can look it up. Escape the name of that gang. Armor and Swift, this is your meatpacking company. Up here on the top right, that's revolutionary. The invention of the refrigerator car. Not only moving meat to market, but also moving produce to market. On the left, Wyatt Earp. On the right, Wild Bill Hickok. The U.S. Marshal's badge. Law enforcement in the West. The era of the American cowboy, we get our you find the name of it? The gang that they battled. We'll take a look at it in a little while. The era of the American cowboy, we get our profession and our skills from the Mexican vaquero. They teach us everything from the cattle drive to lasso techniques. We learn our techniques from the Mexican cowboy. In fact, this is one of the most integrated professions in this era. Civil War veterans, some women, free African Americans, Latino. All that mattered was you were good. And you could get the cattle to market without getting robbed or killed. Head of cattle ran hundreds of thousands of dollars. And getting them to market was necessary. There are three major factors that bring about an end to the cowboy era and cause it to only be a short 20-year period. Number one, lack of food and water for the cattle across the open range. Number two, the railroad. The railroad was expanding, meaning you didn't have to move the cattle as far as you did. Number three, the invention of barbed wire, patented by Joseph Glidden. That patent turns the beef business into big business. It goes from moving cattle to market to large-scale ranching. So powerful that the Wyoming Stock Growers Association controlled all politics in the state of Wyoming at the turn of the century. So here on the top left, we have the vaquero and a blend of both Latino and white cowboys that are coming over from the American South and possibly the North, Midwest. Free African Americans out of the Civil War becoming cowboys, and this is the patent, Glidden's patent for barbed wire. Yeah, sure. This was something we've already brought up and we're not done talking about. And that's the large-scale purchase of land in the West, and that is the Homestead Act. You put $10 down for a filing fee, and you're able to buy as much as 160 acres of land, just $1.25 an acre. This is a colossal land giveaway. A lot of people are going to go out west. I'm talking about some of my family members in the post-Civil War era tried to go out west with the Homestead Act, busted, and went back to Rockbridge County, Virginia. Most people are trying to go out there to do what? How do they want to carve out a life? They want to farm, right? But there's some obstacles. Prairie fires, high winds, the 100th meridian, less rainfall, east of the 100th meridian. You also have a problem with massive windstorms, Rocky Mountain locusts, number of different factors. Another thing too is, let's say you're a Virginia farmer. The things that you might try to take out west to cultivate might not work. You're not going to be able to grow tobacco out on the plains. Cotton is not going to be a crop that's going to work out on the Great Plains. You're going to have to adapt to corn and wheat, things of that nature. There's also a lot of fraudsters, hucksters, land speculators that would buy up the land, gobble up the land, and they wouldn't follow through with what they were supposed to. In fact, you had to build a 12 by 14 foot cabin on the land. So these guys would build a 12 by 14 inch house on the land, and they would just, pretend to cultivate it, pretend to follow the rules. What do you think those folks were waiting on? Railroad. Very good. They're waiting on the railroad. They know that if they hang on long enough, maybe they'll be able to sell that land and make a profit off of it. Very good. What happens if they don't want to sell the land? What can the railroad do?
You can buy it out for the
Right. Eminent domain. They're going to be able to get it either way. There's another group of people that are going to come over during this era as well. A lot of Scandinavians, Norwegians come over to provide timber. Not a lot of trees and timber in the Great Plains. They're going to require timber to build up their towns. So there's a huge logging timber boom in the Northwest. Minnesota. Yeah. Wisconsin. So on the top left here, this is what a homestead cabin would look like. Here's an advertisement for the Homestead Act. I love this picture. A couple of homesteaders just kind of floating down the river here on a dugout log. This is what your common homesteader house might have looked like out in Kansas on the plains. Sod house. Free African Americans taking advantage of the Homestead Act. Great deal of obstacles. You got the Transcontinental Railroad heading out. The Rocky Mountain locust. The 100th meridian. Wes Powell, geologist, discovers the lack of rainfall, this theory, the lack of rainfall as he explores the Colorado. This also leads to a movement for developing irrigation systems using aquifer in the Great Plains, also aqueduct programs and damming programs. So Missouri, Colorado, Columbia rivers will be dammed as a result of some of these studies. That doesn't happen overnight. That takes a significant amount of time. Also, dry farming, topsoil farming, plowing in the topsoil over and over and over again for years and years and years and years and years, creates a geological disaster. During the Great Depression, where the Dust Bowl will pick up, these massive windstorms will pick up dust and blow them across the country, In cities like DC and New York, there'd be like 6 inches of dust in the streets. Do you guys remember the 2012 derecho? Remember that massive windstorm in June of 2012? That's like the strength of the winds. Check it out. Pretty interesting. 2012 derecho destroyed a lot in Virginia. It started out in the Midwest. Horrible windstorm in your lifetime. All right, here we have geologist Wes Powell and his Native American guide Tagu on the Colorado River. That's the 100th meridian. And there will be an aquifer in this region, but it takes time and money to develop a proper irrigation system. There's the locust, and this is a locust swarm. We're all familiar with the locust, right? Locusts and cicadas around here. They eat up those crops, eat up the trees. So this is an era where the West comes of age. This is advantageous for the federal government because all these new former territories are coming in as new ratified states. What does that mean for the federal government? More income, yeah. Taxable income. There's going to be, by 1912, all of the 48 continental states will be ratified. So Jefferson thought it was going to take America 1,000 years to settle the lands gained through the Louisiana Purchase and the lands obtained, well, what he saw before his death through Manifest Destiny. Obviously, he was not alive to see the Texas Revolution or the Mexican War, but what happens is it just takes a little over 100. The Mormons will officially ban polygamy in 1890. They'll be admitted as a state in 1896. During Benjamin Harrison's presidency, a land law and another broken treaty in Oklahoma, in the Indian Territory in Oklahoma, will allow white settlers to move in and settle parts of the Indian Territory. What tribes are involved with this? Think Indian Removal Act. Yeah. Cherokee, Choctaw, Chickasaw Creek. Remember, a lot of those tribes sided with the Confederacy during the Civil War. So this is yet another broken treaty. That's why we call Oklahoma the Sooner State. People flew out into Oklahoma sooner than they were supposed to. So what I've got for you here is a map of the Indian Territory. This is the area that the Sooners were allowed to settle in. That's the Conestoga wagon becomes the mascot of the University of Oklahoma because it's the Sooner State. And here they are busting into the territory sooner than they were supposed to. So we come to an end of the frontier west. Obviously, it's still pretty wild, and there's a lot of resources and agriculture to profit upon, but it leads to a movement for conservation, starting with Grant, the establishment of Yellowstone National Park under Teddy Roosevelt, Yosemite and Sequoia. I highly recommend you visit at least one national park, if not as many as you can, in your lifetime. Those are just awesome opportunities to take advantage of, especially out west. We also have Frederick Jackson Turner's Turner Thesis. Basically talks about the frontier and how that idea of moving west played an important role for American history and American rugged individualism. I think we still kind of live by the Turner Thesis, sort of feeling like our American history has been in large degree the history of the colonization of the entire continent. We also have Western cities that are growing: Chicago, Denver, San Francisco. A continuation of clash of cultures in the West between Native Americans, settlers, immigrants, freedmen moving west. And then some writers like Bret Harte, Mark Twain, Helen Hunt Jackson, Frederick Jackson Turner, artists like George Catlett, and this guy, you're probably familiar with his work, Frederick Remington. There's the Bronco Buster. Have y'all ever seen that before? Familiar with that famous sculpture? I really recommend. Have you guys gone to the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts before? Been there? Again, this is a cheap date, right? You can go down there, you can visit for free, you can check it out. I highly recommend you go to the American Art exhibit. In the American Art exhibit, sort of goes from colonial to modern day. As you go from colonial to the new nation, they have a Frederick Remington, original Frederick Remington in the VMFA. Very cool. Worth your time. So, produce and mass production in the West. Large scale production due to not only the invention but also the improvement upon a number of different agricultural inventions. The McCormick Reaper is being mass produced in Chicago. The combine is invented. It's like a combination between sort of the reaper and a thresher. Tractors. Tractor companies in competition, like Case, and one that you're very familiar with that is green and yellow. John Deere, very good. This is also an era where you might not have a general store in your local town, especially if you take advantage of the Homestead Act. So folks like Sears and Roebuck and Montgomery Ward take advantage of this opportunity, and they send out mail order catalogs. How many of you guys still get catalogs at your house? Yeah, probably all of us. They just pile up, hopefully we recycle them. I recycle most of mine before they even get through the door. So the premise is this. You send out the catalog, and in the catalog, the person on the frontier or the Great Plains can order anything from a gun to a Singer sewing machine to a dress, you name it, they could order it. It's basically like what? Amazon in the late 1800s. So on the top left here, we've got the Sears and Roebuck catalog. Bottom left, Montgomery Ward. These particular inventions, though, make farming, like the cattle business, big business. A lot of migrant farmers coming into the country at this time to perform labor on the farms, and large corporations owning these farms. Almost turns farming in California and parts of the West into like large-scale plantations. It's kind of a twisted sort of fate that a lot of people that are trying to go out there and farm wind up in what system all over again? Not enslavement. Kind of sharecropping. Very good. Sharecropping. All right. But the victims in the West, most of the victims in the West of that are going to be Latino, mostly Mexican migrants and Chinese migrants in the late 1800s. You guys have any questions for me? All right.